Let's tackle some tough questions.
Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers,
We're therapists.
and we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin.
Brannon, what's going on, man?
Just not much. Just trying not to die driving here today because the storm.
We finally got some weather here.
I mean, let it come. Just let it pound us. I love it.
Yeah, we need more snow. Now that our families are both getting into like more winter type activities, my daughter, we used to hate the snow, and now she's like begging for the snow to come because it's the first year she's got a season pass to go skiing. So
I know.
she was happy today.
It's a catch-22 because when it's snowing really hard, you love it because it's putting snow in the mountains. But also it's really hard to drive up the mountains when it's snowing really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I'm glad the snow is coming.
Yeah.
So, well, Tyler, we need some more guests. We have some coming up in the future here, but we need to get a few more on our list, on our schedule. So, how do people go about, coming on, asking us a question? It's a great opportunity to, use our skills, our, experience to bounce off what's going on in your life, and it also helps a lot of other people when you come on. So how do they sign up to come on the show, Tyler?
Yeah, we actually have a way to schedule to come on, and the truth is that you and I, Brannon, we prioritize someone who's going to be a caller even more than just submitting a question via writing. And so if you're interested in coming on the show, we're usually pretty full, but with the first of the year and the holidays, there's been a few openings. Go to therapybros.com. That's therapybros.com. And then just hit the ask a question button. It'll give you an opportunity to either ask a written question or to sign up to come on the show. If you'd like to talk to me and Brannon, you want to come on and share your own experience and your own questions, we'd love to visit with you. Our callers are what actually make the show as good as it is. So we love having you come on.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. Well, let's get to some of these questions. We have a ton of questions.
With that said, because we like to take callers and we prioritize the callers, we actually have a backlog of questions that I think was close to 300 questions long.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna hit a few of them today because we ended up not having a caller for this episode, and so we're just gonna kind of rapid fire as many as we can get through.
Why don't you start, Tyler?
You want me to start with the first question?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. So this is some of these are actually fairly old. So I hope the person who's listening to this is still with us because I think it was a while ago. But it says, love your enemy, do good to those that spitefully use you, turn the other cheek, and go the extra mile. I would love to hear your thoughts on these Christian ideals that can be weaponized by a spouse to assault boundaries you've put in place. Do I believe in these values? Yes. Do I believe that boundaries are a must? Yes. And this is a newer realization for me. I have done some deep down soul searching to come to my core values and truth, and have strived to live by those. Much thanks for your podcast and answers to the questions to help ground me and help me discover the truths about myself. I've felt betrayed in my relationship with my wife, and I have set personal boundaries to take me out of the situations that led to these feelings of betrayal because it's something I can control myself. Namely, I will no longer spend time with my wife and her friend as it is not a safe environment for me. Their actions together go against my values of loyalty, trust, and family. I have clearly addressed my concerns directly with my wife and wife and her friend, so there is no ambiguity on how I feel about the relationship. I have found peace in this decision, which would make one think all would be well, but I once again find turmoil in my life. I've taken a leadership role in our church, and my wife's anxiety spiked. She peppered me with a question such as, how can you be a leader and not love everyone? How can you cut someone out of your life that is so good? My friend does not even know if she can come to church with you as one of the leaders. You're a hypocrite in saying people show love and kindness to others, yet you cut this person out of your life and don't welcome them into the home. Dang, Brandon and Tyler, I would love some insights here. I am not out slandering this person by any means, but they are just not feeling loved by me. Love your enemy? How exactly are you supposed to love the person that seems to have replaced you in the family in your spouse's life? It feels like Christian principles mentioned previously are being used as a wrecking ball on my boundaries. I'd love your podcast because you're willing to say the hard things. Let me have it if I'm way off.
If I remember right,
I think we
I
touched
think
on this one a little while ago.
I think he came on the show.
Yeah, I think we actually had a caller, if not this question, but something very similar.
Yeah, like the same thing. So
Yeah.
I think it's the same one. So but we can talk about the question, like the overall question, which is how do you love your enemy, right? Like and stay true to your principles and your boundaries, right?
Yep.
Um so what do you think?
Well, there's a few things inside the question that kind of lead me to say this work has actually been happening. One is that I find myself at peace with my decisions. If I've worked myself to a place of peace with my decisions, that means my heart is at least at peace with what I'm deciding to do, which then means most likely I'm acting according to my value system. Uh, the simple truth is that this is a hard question because if I get my boundaries right, and sometimes boundaries include space and distance more than deeper connection and closeness, even though boundaries invite that too in the right ways. Um, you're going to get criticized, especially by the people who are being most affected by the boundaries.
Yeah. So let me try to say it this way. If I'm acting in truth, then I'm always acting in love. Um, and so if I act in truth and it affects somebody's life and it causes consequence that they're uncomfortable with, um, but how can that still be acting in love? Are you following me?
Yeah, that's where people get twisted up all the time.
Right. So the thing is we over attach to people. So what I mean by that is if I am worried about like them not liking me or them saying this is out of spite or out of revenge or and let's say it's not out of those things. Let's say it's out of truth. It's out of honest to goodness truth. Um and they think that it's about those things. It doesn't mean that I'm still not acting out of love and truth. Um and that I need to not attach to that. That's theirs to deal with. Um the judgment of my intention and my heart or whatever I'm doing. Now, what I really need to be clear with is my heart. And I need to check out, is this force? Is it control? Is it spite? Is it revenge? Is it resentment? Is it trying to prove a point? Like I need to really look at that and really get down to what is acting in my truth. And if I can get clear with that, and this is what we say between you and God, right? Like if you can get clear between you and God what that truth is, are you going to follow what God's asking you to do? Or are you going to over attach and take on them saying you suck, you're to blame, you're bad, why are you doing this?
Right.
Right? Now,
Exactly.
do I sound like that leads to no empathy? That leads to not caring about the other person?
On the contrary, I maybe one sometimes changing the context might help with this principle here. So, we're talking about a marriage situation. Sounds like he's definitely been hypocritical in the past, which is he's not arguing. There are some things, breach of trust in the relationship that he's also dealing with from her end, right? And so he's trying to set these boundaries and he's trying to do that work. I'm taking that at face value. If you just change the context a little bit, let's say your kid, let's say one of your kids comes home from school and they you get a call from the school that says they haven't turned in like any homework for like 4 weeks. And then he comes home from school and
I
he's
think
like,
I've got that. I think I got that call a few times
he
recently.
comes he comes home from school and he's like, "Hey dad, like I don't have any homework today. I'm going to go down and play some video games, watch some movies." maybe eat some nachos, like whatever.
You're
Right.
describing my situation. You eat some
So
nachos, dump them all over the floor, not clean them up.
yeah,
You know,
and I'm not gonna vacuum my mess up. I told you I didn't have any homework. Meanwhile, you're sitting on this call. What are you gonna do with your kid?
um, well, I well, there's a difference between what I might do and what the healthy thing is to do.
But
Um,
what would the healthy thing be to do for your child? Being a parent, being the best parent you can be. What's the best thing you could do for your son?
well, I think the reality, like lovingly showing the reality to him is healthy. So turning a blind eye and smiling and being like, "Oh yeah, well if you say so," that's a parent that's not showing up for their kid. Um, if I go down and I rip the cord out of the wall and I yell at him for being a liar and that's all he is, and I smash all his nachos all over the floor because I'm pissed, like that, but if I lovingly go down there and I say, "Hey, I'm on the phone with the school. This is what they're saying." Um, and it's interesting because as a parent-child relationship, we are more attached. Like it's my job to help um, provide structure and help him learn consequence. Um, and so I'm not going to force him to go do his homework right then, but the, I do have the, I would say, power to turn that TV off. I do have the power to say no video games until you're caught up on your homework. Um, what would be better though is to help him choose to do no video games until he's caught up on his homework. So help him see the reality of it, encourage him to step into that. But then you may need to make the decision. And really that truth is for me because I love him and I care about him, that we need to take away the distractions so he can help get done what he needs to, right?
Yep. Yeah, so there's a couple of things then, Brannon. If you let him continue to do those things and you are his parent, you're not loving him.
Right.
And you it might actually be loving him to go and say, "Hey, dude, like we got issues, we got trust issues, we got school issues, we got habit issues. Like we got to figure some of this stuff out. And in order to help you, well, there's no video games in our house until you're caught up with your schoolwork." And then he comes back and he's like, "Well, Dad, you don't trust me, and Dad, that's not Christian. And what about agency, Dad? And what about like I get to do my own thing? Like you don't believe in any of these Christian values." Like,
See, but right there is the attempt to, I would say, over attach. So that's his attempt to say, I'm going to tell you what your truth is through guilt and shame and passive aggressive behavior, whatever aggressive behavior. And this is where you got to come back to. I can stand on my own truth. I can love you still. I can see your pain, and I can stay strong with my truth, no matter what buttons you push to try to kind of railroad this thing. Right.
right.
Um, Now, in the situation that we talked about and what you brought up, it's like, she could say, "Look, I have a right to have this relationship with my friend. You haven't showed up for me. You've lied to me. You're not safe. I need this relationship because you failed our marriage." Now, she might be acting in her truth, right? But the reality is it's better for her to own that if that's her real truth with him, rather than like try to guilt trip him into seeing that it's okay or whatever. Like just own it. Just be you. Let me give you an example, Tyler, and this is kind of the other side of the spectrum of this thing. So let's say, and this is ridiculous. I'm gonna give a ridiculous example, okay, just to kind of prove a point. Let's say your wife came to you and lovingly told you that she's going to have a relationship with the neighbor. Like and it's going to be a full-fledged relationship, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And but she wants you to stick around. She doesn't want your relationship to change, but God's telling her to go have that relationship with the neighbor. Okay, so then where do you go? What do you do?
Well, I could come back and say what would I do or what should I do?
Yeah, what's the healthy response?
Right, right, because there's the human element, there's the emotional components and all that stuff. But in essence, the principle I think you're trying to get at is that I'm going to have to wrestle back and forth with my wife for a little while and say, hey, look, that doesn't work for me. If you choose to do those kinds of things, here's going to be the outcomes, and the outcomes will include us not being together. Like, I believe in fidelity in marriage. I believe in us being together. I
And
believe in the
she
law
and
of
she says
chastity.
she says I appreciate your truths, but like an angel came down and told me I have to be in a relationship with him, right? So
Yeah.
and so uh, I mean, I did the angel actually come down or not? If that's her truth, that's what she's doing. So this is what I mean. It has nothing to do with her. It has everything coming back to you and your truths.
Well,
And
I think the point you were trying to make earlier is if that I then go to her and start telling her all the ways she's a sinner and all the ways that she's wrong and all the ways my heart by nature is still maybe not at peace yet. Whereas if I'm
yep.
focusing on myself and my own values and saying, well, that doesn't that does not work for me. That's not going to happen.
Well, it's interesting
Right.
what you said, Tyler. I'd shift. You said, I'm obviously going to wrestle with my wife a little bit. And I would say, yeah, you might, but first wrestle with you. Like, first wrestle with, get grounded with who you are. What are your truths? So then you can show up with her honest, vulnerable, authentic, and talking about what you need and who you are. And if she comes back and says, well, I can't give that to you. And this is what I think we all try to avoid. We try to avoid pain and change in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always lead to ending the relationship or divorce, but sometimes it's awesome when both partners have a conflict and they're different, but they show up honestly, and then they say, "Okay, like I have to have my boundaries. Things are going to shift here. You have your boundaries. Things are going to shift there." And now we have a new relationship. Um, but at least we have a relationship built on honesty. At least we have a relationship built on authenticity, not a relationship built on manipulation and force and control, which undermines trust and safety in the relationship. Um, but the one requirement to have that second thing that I'm talking about is for each partner to show up actually honest, like actually humbly loving and honest. And if you can do that, then you can be different people and you can navigate the changes and you'll actually know each other better. You'll probably have better intimacy, deeper connection. And it probably won't lead to these extreme examples that we're talking about. Like, hey, I want to have a partner on the side. It's not probably won't lead to those type of things in most cases.
Yeah, well, and if it is those extreme cases, then you're better off having the truth out and moving on with your lives sooner than later.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Whatever
Yeah.
that means. I'm going
Yeah.
to live my life and my values, and I want everyone else around me to do the same. And I will naturally connect with and join with the people where our values overlap.
And
And
yeah,
and I can allow other people to just then be themselves.
where we see this a lot, Tyler, is there's a lot of different things. We see it with sexuality and sex, right? We see it with money, and we see it a lot with spirituality, faith transition. Like for two partners to come together and say, "This is I as an individual. Who are you as an individual? How can we honor each other, respect each other, fight for each other's truths, but at the same time be different people?" Um, and that's a beautiful thing when a couple can navigate that well, and they actually get a lot closer and trust each other a lot more, as opposed to I'm different than you, you're different than me, you're wrong, I'm right, and so I need to prove to you how wrong you are so that you come my way and so through some resentment on your part you'll come my way and then boom everything's solved. That's not how a healthy relationship works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, you ready for another one?
Yeah. Your turn.
Okay, let's see. I chose this one because um I actually saw several different questions with this question in it. Okay, so um, I'll read it. It says, in response to your episode about discerning between good and bad advice from experts, you mentioned differentiating between stepping into our truth versus rebellion, etc. How can I tell the difference? I'm trying to step out of the shame that I have allowed to rule me for most of my life, but I have found myself very troubled recently when I wasn't 100% in agreement with the counselor my wife and I were speaking with. I worry that I'm swinging from shame to pride, which maybe are opposite sides of the same coin.
That's a good question. I think there's, I'll share a couple thoughts, and you can add yours, Brannon. But there's a couple different things that come to mind when I hear that question. The first one is one way to check that is to think dialectically, where swinging from shame to pride, when I'm just instantly rejecting anything anybody ever says, that might be prideful, right? That might be like some type of rebellion, whatever. But if I ask the question, curious question, and I do it with true curiosity, what's the kernel of truth that they might be speaking here? I don't have to agree with everything, but if I can at least ask the question and say, can I find a kernel of truth here? Now I'm on a quest to see what parts could still apply to me without having to accept the whole thing. And I think that helps diminish pride.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that I would say, at least for me, is what does your heart say in the way that you're going about making these changes? There's a difference between like this fear of stepping into the new and being paralyzed by the fear of the shame. And if my value system says, yep, I know I need to jump off this cliff, and this is just that anticipation and that fear, I need to step into that and go through that. Whereas if I'm living from this place of deep shame, there's going to be a heart at war with self, meaning you're going to feel either better than or worse than somebody else. You're going to be, there's going to be a lot of self judgment going through your head. I am basically blank, fill in those gaps. Any of those motivations are the motivations of shame, right? Whereas a heart at peace is more growth minded. It's more open. It's more willing to take that step into the possibility that maybe even you're wrong, and that's okay too. Because you're gonna
Right.
because you're gonna learn. You're doing it through experience.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Tyler, but it'll get you on a soapbox, so I'm going to hold off for just a second before I ask you it. Um, there, I think we all have moments in our life when uh, we're asked to compromise our truths for some reason, and it seems like when there's a power dynamic, it's easy to second guess ourselves and go along with just what it is. So, I think of the soldiers for Germany in World War II, millions of soldiers fighting for that cause. Did any of them stop and think like, I don't know if this feels like a cause worth dying for? Um, and and so if there's a power dynamic, if there's a group think going on, so a counselor in a therapy session who's a professional being paid to give you the answers, but your gut is like blaring off saying, this doesn't feel right to me. This doesn't feel right. And it's not your defense mechanisms, it's your gut. Um, I think of I think of some of the things I've gotten from some leaders and things that I've done in the past. I've done them because my leaders have told me to, in spite of what my gut was telling me, in spite of the consequences of stepping into the truth. Um, and the example I want to throw past you, Tyler, and I know this is a hot button issue for you, um, is COVID. Like how many things did we all do that didn't feel in our integrity or in our truth, but we all went along with them anyways because of all of the fear mongering and groupthink, and so we're all just going through all this stuff for over a year, and then all of a sudden it just evaporates and goes away. In many ways, COVID's still out there. I'm not saying COVID's not out there, but like all the fear mongering around it, um, yet we all participated in to some degree, right? Um, and why? Why do we do that as humans? We don't trust our guts. We're scared of the consequences. It's not worth it, right? Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah. That's making me think of like those old psychological studies where, there's two different studies that have kind of been done on this. One is with an authoritarian figure where, the they get people to do things that are just completely outside the realm of anything humane just because there's an authoritarian figure standing over them saying, do this,
Just
do
keep
this, do
doing
this,
it.
right?
Do it. Do it.
The other one is the study they've done on like social pressure, the group think kind of a thing where, if you put four people in a room and then you give them like questions to ask and they answer out loud, like which of these, they put out three lines and there's one line that's obviously longer than the rest of them. And they're like, which of these lines is the longest? And there's three people who are planted that pick the shortest line and they're like, it's letter A. And the one person there is like looking at them. They kind of look around the room for a second, and then they're like, "A." Like, it only takes like three people to like in an elevator. The same thing
it's
is
the
true.
obvious answer. The obvious truth is right in front of them,
It's
but
right in
because
front
the
of you, but
three
the
other
social
ones,
pressure, it just takes three people. And the same thing, they've done this on elevators with people where they can get people to turn and face the corners of the back corner of an elevator just by having one person who doesn't know what's going on and then a few people who do, and they all face the same way. And then eventually the one person who's looking out the door just kind of like turns and like faces the
lemmings,
corner. Like,
lemmings. We're just lemmings. We're sheep.
we're social beasts. We can't stand the thought of rejection. We can't stand the thought that most of us can't handle the pressure of being the outsider.
Right.
And, and I think using your example, not that we want to get into all of my own feelings in politics, but I regret that I let go of some of my own personal values. And I justified it and rationalized it by saying, well, I'm playing nice. I'm doing the thing that everybody else thinks for courtesy purposes. But in the process, what I didn't realize is that we were giving away a whole lot of other things and we were being misled in a lot of ways. And it is kind of interesting that it went away as soon as we decided to have an election and then things turned to Ukraine. Um, it
Yeah.
disappeared. It disappeared overnight. Um, and people were being silenced who are now being shown to have been right all along.
Right.
And and the people who were actually trying to have a voice and being silenced, the ones who got canceled, the ones who, they were the courageous ones who actually went against the grain a little bit here.
Right.
And I mean, I look at like even how things happened and played out, like even me being able to go to church with how I felt about vaccinations and masks and everything else. I've already told my wife that if COVID 2.0 hits like this winter, um, I'm making different choices this
Well,
time around.
okay. Okay. Let's get back to the whole principle at play here with this question, right? Because we're kind of going a way off here, but it's the same
You're leading me
principle.
there.
Yeah, 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 which I love. But it's the same principle here. When I did you ever see the movie Bridge of Spies?
um, I think was that the one.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, yep. And he's
Yeah,
like the defender for like a spy, right?
yeah, he's the defender for a Nazi spy.
Yeah.
And this was the time where like communism was so looked. I mean, it was the just Cold War. Like, so here Tom Hanks is, and his job is to defend this guy. Like that's his job, and so he's doing everything he can in his purpose to put together an honest, fair defense for this guy. And the consequences start to come, where the public, the government, the country, and then even his own wife is like, "What are you doing? Stop! Like, stop it! And why are you doing this?" And he's like, "Look, I'm just doing the best I can for my job." And the guy, I can't remember the movie exactly, but I think the guy was innocent, and so he was fighting for an innocent man the best that he could against all of this political, social pressure, consequences, and he stayed firm to this principle of integrity throughout all of it. And through the movie, you could see that he was just a strong man who understood truth. Um, you know, like I say, we're asked to sell out all the time. Now, therapy is tricky. This situation with, well, I look like I'm fighting against the therapist because I look defensive. You need to really check yourself to see if you're defensive. You really need to understand whether you're acting in truth or whether you're acting in manipulation. And when you say, I fear that I'm swinging from shame to pride, what I hear is that you don't know yourself. You don't trust yourself.
Not
So
yet.
the work to be done is that right there is to say, okay, like who am I? I need to trust myself. Um, but the way that you trust yourself, and here's the good news and the bad news. The way that you start trusting yourself is to step into situations like this the best that you possibly can, and that's what refines you.
Right.
And you're gonna figure out who you are, right,
Yep.
Tyler?
That's right. So I actually think if you have a good therapist, take your questions to your therapist, have a little bit of friction, but then try to view whatever happens with curious eyes. And you'll practice that. You'll practice having things settle in. And sometimes you walk away and go, oh yeah, some of that might be true, but the rest of it, no, I don't really feel is true. Okay, good. I've just come to more conclusion on my own values. Um,
Yep,
that's okay. And that's as long as there's the curiosity, I think the push there is still okay.
yep, yep. Um,
So
well, Tyler, this has been fun.
yeah. Can we do one more?
Yeah, let's if we make it quick, we could do another one.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Um, hey guys, I was on the show about a year ago with a question. Can you know too much about recovery? I don't want to come on the show again, but I have another question if you can just answer it. And it says, I've noticed my husband, who is an intimacy anorexic or avoidant, doing some recovery work to overcome. He is 900 days clean and sober from his SA. He attends group weekly and does counseling here and there, but he's lazy. He's lazy when it comes to helping out around the house, lazy when it comes to our kids. Basically, it's a struggle to get him to do anything except go to work. I'm curious, is this a correlation to his intimacy anorexia or sexual addiction behaviors, or is it just his personality? How can I tell? It feels personal to me. Maybe I'm just taking it personally. Any advice?
I mean, my first thought, Tyler, her question about is it a correlation? Um, I I don't know. Is it just his personality or I don't know, but I think it's kind of beside the point.
Yep.
Um, right? Like if that's happening, it's happening, and you have a partner that's showing up that way. So then the question is, you can crack a whip and try that over and over and over again, and it'll probably lead to him hunkering down even more, and maybe it is a power play on his part. Like, look, I know you hate this, so I'm going to be as lazy as I possibly can be. Um, I hope it's not that. If it's that, that's pretty nasty passive aggressive behavior. Um, so you can crack the whip, but what I would encourage you to do is kind of what we were just talking about, is stop for a minute and get clear with what you need and who you are and what your boundaries are in a relationship, and just be honest with him about that. If you're feeling like there's not equity there, there's not teamwork, um, then maybe you need to have some hard conversations and then actually have some boundaries with him.
I think you're spot on with that, Brannon. I don't know. There could be some things that are correlated there. There also just might need to be some. They might be completely separate, and there might just need to be some additional discussion slash boundaries around around the partnership and what's going to work for both of you around raising the kids and the house care and everything else too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like we said, don't change your truths, but really look at your expectations too. Are your expectations getting you in trouble? Like maybe he is a really hard worker and works really hard in certain areas that you're not really noticing or seeing. And then he wants to lay on the couch and watch TV at night. And so like maybe it's that. Maybe it's your expectations. Maybe he truly is just apathetic, indifferent, lazy, and not connected to the household at all. And if that's the case, then like really try to look at the real evidence, um, and make some decisions from there.
Yeah.
I can see, Tyler, a combination of sexual anorexia and laziness can be pretty brutal for a partner, of just feeling not fought for, not cared about, not seen,
Not engaged with.
not engaged with at all. And it's probably a pretty lonely place. I mean, that laziness probably reflects that loneliness
Yeah.
in the relationship. And so that sucks and is
Yeah.
not okay, right?
It's kind of a double whammy because, you know, you might work with somebody who doesn't have the sexual anorexia type stuff that still shows some level of warmth, intimacy, interest, even if they're lazy and don't help out around the house. But, you know, but at least you get some there. Or the opposite is maybe I have some intimacy anorexia, but I still choose to do the things that are less intimate, but I still help out around the house to show that I still care, this, that, the other.
Right.
You're getting kind of the double whammy there. So it probably does feel pretty isolating and pretty difficult in terms of knowing whether or not you're chosen and cherished in the relationship.
It's just a partner that's not really a partner,
Yeah.
right? It's a body in the house with you that is, yeah, that could be pretty hard.
Just a physical provider.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's natural for anybody to want more out of a relationship than that.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Tyler, this was fun.
All right, man. Good episode,
Yeah.
Brannon.
Yeah, next episode I expect you to be wearing your mask.
only if only if we get our arms twisted again with a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't scientific.
All right. You guys, if you like this episode, please share it, and please go over to therapybros.com and sign up to be a guest. We'll see you.